Ladies, listen carefully. There's a way you walk into a room. There's a way your voice cuts through the noise. And there is a way you speak that doesn't ask for respect, it commands it. This isn't about being loud. It's not about seduction. It's about showing up as a woman who knows her value and will never again diminish it for the sake of being liked. Because here's the truth, the world doesn't shape a high-value woman. She shapes the world around her. There is something magnetic about a woman who doesn't enter a room to be seen, but to be felt. She doesn't chase attention, doesn't seek permission to exist, and never asks, was I enough? Her confidence doesn't scream, it whispers, and yet it echoes long after she's gone. In relationships and intimacy, this presence becomes her most powerful form of seduction. Because the truth is, real desire doesn't come from what's loud. It comes from what's undeniable, and presence is undeniable. Most women have been conditioned to perform in intimacy, to look a certain way, moan at the right time, say the right things to stroke egos, and fake confidence to be desirable. But a high-value woman doesn't need to put on a show. Her sensual power lies in how comfortable she is in her own skin. She understands that sex is not about being someone's fantasy, it's about being fully herself in the moment. She doesn't need to act, she simply is, and that authenticity creates intimacy that no performance ever could. She walks into the bedroom the same way she walks into any conversation, with her head high and her self-respect intact. She's not there to please at the cost of her own pleasure. She's not a prop in someone else's movie. She's the main character of her own story, and intimacy is just another chapter where she refuses to edit herself down. When she touches, when she kisses, when she opens herself up, it's deliberate, not desperate. She's not afraid of going deep because she's done the work to know what she carries. There's a difference between being looked at and being seen. Most people are just looking for someone to notice them. A high-value woman isn't one of them. She doesn't hunger for validation because she knows who she is. And when she's in an intimate moment, her presence does the work before her body ever does. She doesn't rush, she doesn't chase a goal. She doesn't need a climax to prove something. She's in tune with herself, in tune with her partner, and deeply rooted in the now. That kind of presence is rare, and rare is unforgettable. In relationships, this woman brings that same energy. She doesn't play games to keep interest, and she doesn't pretend to be laid back when something matters to her. She's not needy, but she needs depth. She doesn't want surface-level banter or performative affection. She wants eye contact that lingers, conversations that strip away pretense, and touch that means something. And she holds space for all of that without ever losing herself in someone else. She listens without the need to fix or impress. She speaks without rushing to be heard. She loves without losing her own center, because she knows that in order to be present with someone else, she has to be grounded in herself first. That's her standard. That's her truth. That's her power. She's not seduced by words. She watches for energy. She reads the room, the tone, the hesitations. She's fluent in the things that go unsaid. Her awareness gives her the upper hand, not in a manipulative way, but in a self-protective, deeply intuitive way. She doesn't waste intimacy on situations where she doesn't feel emotionally safe. She values her energy too much to hand it over to someone who hasn't earned access to her heart, her mind, and her body. And in the moments of closeness, the kisses, the breaths, the silence, she slows everything down, not to prolong pleasure, but to stretch out presence, because that's what intimacy is to her. Presence. Not just being touched, but being felt. Not just hearing words, but absorbing energy. Not just being in the same bed, but sharing the same frequency. She knows that real passion doesn't come from noise. It comes from awareness. It comes from eye contact that speaks louder than moans. From a hand on the back that says, I'm here. From a moment of shared stillness that says, you're safe. In relationships, she makes it clear without having to explain her time is sacred, her body is sacred, her love is sacred. She doesn't say yes when she means maybe. She doesn't force connection where it doesn't exist. She doesn't sacrifice her peace to preserve someone else's comfort. Her boundaries are woven into her presence. You feel them before she says them, and her value doesn't fluctuate based on how much she gives. She gives from overflow, not obligation. There's no mask, no act, no need to keep anyone, because a high-value woman knows the right connection doesn't need to be forced, and the wrong one doesn't need to be explained. In both intimacy and relationship, she shows up fully, breathes deeply, moves slowly, and lets her energy speak louder than words. She doesn't lower her voice when something matters. She doesn't sugarcoat her needs in fear of being labeled too much. She doesn't trade her desires for approval. A high-value woman has trained herself to speak from a place of clarity, not craving. She expresses her needs in relationships and intimacy, not as a test, not as a plea, but as a declaration of self-worth. She has learned the power of directness, not to demand but to define. And what she defines, she protects. Most women are taught early on to be soft, to adapt, to accommodate, to make themselves likable, agreeable, pleasing. And that conditioning creeps into intimacy, where silence replaces self-expression, where I'm okay is spoken when she's not, where needs are buried under blankets of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of pushing someone away, but not her. She knows that unspoken needs never disappear. They only breed resentment. So she doesn't swallow discomfort to keep peace. She speaks, even when her voice shakes. In the sacred space of closeness, she doesn't hint, she articulates. She doesn't drop passive clues, hoping someone will read her mind. She values her experience too much to make it a guessing game. Whether it's emotional connection, physical touch, deeper affection, or boundaries that deserve to be honored, she names what matters. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in calm, grounded truth. Her communication doesn't seek attention, it seeks alignment. And alignment for her is non-negotiable. In bed, she isn't just a participant, she's an equal presence. She expresses what brings her pleasure with boldness, not bashfulness. She lets herself be known in moments that most people hide. And because she communicates without shame, she creates a space where vulnerability becomes safe, not scary. She doesn't fake responses to please someone else's ego. She doesn't pretend to enjoy something she doesn't. She's honest, not harsh, not cold, but truthful, because she understands that false comfort creates real distance. She sees her body not as an object of approval, but as a landscape of truth. If something doesn't feel good, she says it. If she's not emotionally present, she pauses. If her body needs slowness, softness, stillness, she doesn't override it to perform. She listens to herself first, always. And because of that, her intimacy is rich, authentic, and deeply nourishing. It's not scripted, it's alive, it breathes with her. In relationships, she doesn't suppress her emotional needs either. If she wants deeper connection, she doesn't wait for someone to magically sense it. She communicates it with language that's clear, intentional, and emotionally intelligent. She doesn't play the martyr. She doesn't keep score. She simply speaks what she needs so that she can give from a place of wholeness, not depletion. Her giving is powerful because it's rooted in truth, not fear. And when someone isn't capable of meeting her needs, she doesn't beg. She doesn't twist herself into someone unrecognizable. She doesn't settle for almost. She observes. She receives the reality, and she makes aligned decisions. Because she knows that every time she silences her needs to preserve a relationship, she erodes the relationship with herself. And she'll never betray her inner voice for temporary comfort. This self-expression is her superpower. It doesn't make her difficult, it makes her defined. And that definition creates clarity in her relationships. There are no blurred lines, no silent expectations, no emotional minefields. She's not afraid to say, I need more tenderness, or this doesn't feel right to me, or I want to feel closer to you emotionally, not just physically. Because for her, intimacy without emotional resonance feels empty, and she refuses to be full on the outside while starving on the inside. She has done the inner work to understand what she needs, to distinguish between wounded attachment and authentic desire. She knows the difference between reacting and responding, between blaming and boundary setting, and that wisdom shapes the way she communicates. She doesn't just react to feelings, she translates them into words. She doesn't just express to be heard, she speaks to connect. Her needs aren't weapons. They're invitations to deeper honesty, deeper connection, and deeper presence. And when she is met with resistance, she doesn't fold. She doesn't dilute herself to be more digestible. She stays rooted, not defensive but discerning, not rigid but self-honoring. She can listen without absorbing blame, and she can stand her ground without creating conflict. Because her goal is never to dominate, it's to align. And alignment only happens when truth is spoken, not when it's edited to keep someone comfortable. In intimacy, this creates magic. Because the more she expresses, the more open the space becomes. Her honesty becomes a mirror that invites realness in return. The closeness she creates isn't based on pretending everything is fine. It's based on the courageous act of being seen, of saying, here's what I need to feel safe, to feel desired, feel emotionally connected. And in that space, intimacy becomes more than physical. It becomes spiritual, because truth is the most intimate act of all. She doesn't rush into intimacy like it's a race to be won. She doesn't see closeness as something to check off a list or prove her worth. She understands that desire doesn't start in the bedroom, it starts in the mind. And long before bodies ever touch, she begins building the foundation of connection with her energy, her voice, her presence. A high-value woman knows that emotional foreplay is not optional, it's essential. Because what makes intimacy unforgettable isn't technique, it's feeling. It's the invisible tension that builds when two people are truly tuned into one another. She knows how to create that tension without even trying too hard. It's the way she looks, not just at someone, but into them. The way she holds a gaze just a moment longer. The way she slows down her movements, making space for anticipation to build. It's in her voice, calm, intentional, unhurried. Every word laced with presence. Every gesture, a message. She doesn't need to say anything overtly seductive. Her entire energy speaks. And what it says is this: I'm fully here, and I want you fully here too. In a world obsessed with shortcuts, she chooses depth. She doesn't jump into physicality before building trust. She knows the power of pacing, of allowing tension to unfold gradually. Because when something simmers slowly, it becomes richer, more intoxicating. She knows that the mind is the first point of entry, and when she stimulates the mind with her words, her awareness, her depth, intimacy becomes a journey, not a transaction. And every step of that journey matters. She is intentional with her touch, not just her words. A hand on the arm, a brush of fingers, a lingering hug. These are not random, they're signals, invitations. And she gives them deliberately, not to tease, but to attune, not to control, but to connect. She understands that emotional safety is arousal's most powerful fuel. When she leans in, when she listens deeply, when she brings all of her attention to the moment, she sends a clear message: you matter here. I'm not distracted. I'm not pretending. I'm present. And presence is what turns a simple moment into something unforgettable. She isn't concerned with performing for someone else's fantasy. She is far more invested in creating a shared experience, one where both people feel equally seen, equally chosen. She doesn't just wait to be desired. She actively builds desire through emotional intimacy. She shares pieces of her story, lets vulnerability soften her tone, allows truth to shape her conversations. And with each layer she reveals, she pulls someone deeper into the emotional space with her. She flirts, not just with her body, but with her words, her intelligence, her curiosity. She asks questions that make someone think. She notices things others overlook. She makes someone feel deeply understood, not just superficially complimented. And that kind of connection, that's where true intimacy begins. In the space between words, in the way she listens, not just to what's said, but to what's meant. In the way she responds, not just to please, but to meet someone emotionally. She moves with grace, speaks with honesty, and holds herself with the kind of self-assurance that makes everything about her magnetic. She doesn't just light a fire in the body, she lights one in the soul, because her intimacy isn't just about pleasure, it's about emotional presence. She knows that when the mind and heart are engaged, the body follows naturally, and in that space, vulnerability becomes erotic, trust becomes chemistry, safety becomes passion. She makes the lead up to intimacy feel like poetry. Every interaction has rhythm, every moment has weight. She allows silence to speak. She lets eye contact linger. She leans in when others would pull back. She's not afraid to create emotional closeness before physical closeness. She doesn't view connection as something to avoid until the lights go out. She brings connection into every step of the journey. And because of that, she doesn't have to force intimacy. It unfolds effortlessly, built on something solid and real. In relationships, this energy becomes her superpower. She doesn't rush milestones. She doesn't need declarations of love. After a few weeks, she builds emotional intimacy, slowly, attentively. She nurtures the connection with presence, consistency, and genuine care. She checks in. She notices shifts. She pays attention to the small moments that others miss. And through this, she creates a space where someone can exhale, where they feel safe enough to open up, where walls come down without needing to be pushed. She speaks about her desires openly, not just physical ones, but emotional ones too. She's unafraid to say, I want us to feel more connected, or I want to know what lights you up, or I want our time together to feel intentional. And when she says it, it doesn't sound needy, it sounds powerful, because she's not asking from lack, she's asking from clarity, and clarity creates closeness. She sets the tone for depth without ever demanding it. She leads with openness and expects the same in return. And when that openness is matched, intimacy becomes sacred. It becomes a space where both people feel seen, chosen, desired, not just physically, but emotionally. She makes sure that the connection feels alive before, during, and after closeness. Because for her, it was never just about sex. It was about the space she creates before it ever begins. She doesn't hand over her intimacy like it's a reward for attention. She doesn't use it to fill an emotional void or prove she's desirable. Her energy is sacred, and she protects it with unwavering strength. A high-value woman treats her body, her time, her emotional openness as something earned, not expected. She has nothing to prove. Not with her touch, not with her presence, and certainly not with her love. When she gives herself, it's not out of insecurity, it's out of deep, conscious choice. From the outside, people may admire her confidence, her poise, her magnetic aura, but what they don't always see is the discipline behind that radiance, the quiet decisions she makes daily to protect her emotional and physical space, the boundaries she's had to learn the hard way, the emotional discipline it takes to not give in to moments of loneliness by giving herself to someone who hasn't earned her. She knows the difference between being vulnerable and being available to just anyone. Her intimacy is not open access, it's invitation only. There's a myth that intimacy requires sacrifice, that to be close to someone means to give yourself away. But she challenges that myth by embodying a different truth. You don't have to lose yourself to love deeply. She knows that true closeness is not about how quickly you can become physical. It's about how strongly you can stay emotionally aligned with your own needs while creating space for connection. She doesn't bend her standards for moments of attention. Her energy is selective because it is powerful. In relationships, she doesn't fall for surface-level affection. She listens to energy, not just words. She watches consistency, not just charm. She knows that attention is easy, but presence is rare. And when she doesn't feel emotionally safe, she doesn't ignore the signs. She doesn't cling to potential. She doesn't wrap red flags in fantasy. She stays rooted because she's learned that emotional clarity is more attractive than any temporary validation. She doesn't chase love with her body, she invites it with her boundaries. And those boundaries aren't rigid or cold, they're warm, clear, and self-honoring. She can be soft and strong, she can be sensual without being submissive. And when she shares physical intimacy, it's not a performance, it's an extension of trust, of emotional depth, of a connection that has earned its way into her most vulnerable places. That trust is not given easily, and that's what makes it powerful. In her world, intimacy without emotional safety is meaningless. It may look like passion, but it doesn't feel like anything real. She refuses to be touched by someone who hasn't taken the time to know her, who hasn't held space for her emotions, who hasn't shown that they can handle the full spectrum of who she is. She doesn't need fireworks to feel alive. She needs resonance. She needs to be met on a level where her soul doesn't have to shrink just to be desired. Her body isn't something to be earned with sweet talk or grand gestures. It's a reflection of how deeply she trusts herself. She knows when to open and when to hold back. Not from fear, but from wisdom. She's tuned into her intuition. She's sensitive to energy. She can feel when the room changes, when someone is present versus just performing. And she never doubts the signals her body gives her. If something feels off, she steps back. If something feels forced, she pauses. If something feels too fast, she slows it down without apology. She's not interested in proving she's low maintenance. She doesn't see emotional needs as a burden. She owns them, speaks them, lives them. In intimacy, she doesn't say yes just to keep the peace. She says yes when her body, mind, and heart are fully aligned. That alignment is her compass. It guides every touch, every kiss, every connection she allows into her life. She also honors aftercare, not just in physical intimacy, but emotional. She doesn't separate the body from the soul. She checks in, reflects, listens to herself. If something didn't feel right, she gives herself space to process. If something felt beautiful, she allows herself to absorb it, to remember it, to be nourished by it, because she understands that real intimacy leaves echoes, it lingers, and she doesn't rush to move on or numb it. She lets it be felt fully. That's how she keeps her energy clean, clear, and powerful. When someone tries to get close to her, she doesn't make it a test, but she does make it intentional. She watches how they handle her silence, not just her seduction, how they respect her space, not just her body, how they react to her not tonight, her I need to talk, her this doesn't feel right. And in those moments, she learns more about them than any sweet talk could ever reveal. Because respect is not about agreeing with everything. It's about holding space for boundaries even when desire is present. She brings the same standard into her relationships. She doesn't give endlessly to prove her loyalty. She gives from a full cup. She nurtures, supports, and shows up, but never at the cost of herself. She's learned the difference between being generous and being depleted. She knows that giving love is a beautiful act, but it should never require her to betray herself in the process. Her emotional energy is gold, and she treats it accordingly. She doesn't flinch at the sound of her own desire. She doesn't shrink when pleasure is the topic. She doesn't lower her voice or avert her eyes when talking about what excites her, moves her, or turns her on. A high-value woman has shed the conditioning that told her to be quiet, to be modest, to be passive. She no longer sees her sexual power as something to be hidden or tamed. She sees it for what it is, a force wild, sacred, magnetic, and entirely hers. In intimacy, she is not a passenger. She's not waiting for someone else to light her up or teach her how to feel. She arrives already connected to herself. She knows the terrain of her body, the rhythm of her breath, the language of her own arousal. She doesn't rely on someone else to introduce her to pleasure. She brings herself to the experience fully aware, fully engaged, and fully in control. And that confidence doesn't just radiate, it seduces not through effort, but through sheer authenticity. She is not the woman who needs to be told she's desirable to believe it. Her desirability is not up for debate. It doesn't fluctuate based on the room she's in, the clothes she's wearing, or the level of attention she receives. It's embedded deep within her, rooted in her knowing. She doesn't perform to be wanted. She exists in full expression of herself, and that is enough. She's not afraid to be bold in her pleasure. She's not ashamed of craving depth, passion, and emotional eroticism that goes beyond mechanics. In the bedroom, she leads with presence, not performance. She doesn't fake her responses to stroke someone else's ego. She doesn't pretend to be satisfied when she's not. She doesn't lay in silence, wishing the other person would just know what she wants. She speaks it. She moves with intention. She guides with confidence. And when she surrenders, it is not from powerlessness, it is from choice, trust, and full body awareness. She understands that her sensuality is not just about physical touch. It's in the way she carries herself, the way she breathes, the way she speaks. Her sensuality spills into her relationships, like slow honey, thick, warm, and impossible to ignore. She brings passion into everyday moments, a glance across a table, the brush of her fingers, the softness of her voice. When she's fully engaged, she turns connection into foreplay, conversation into intimacy, and trust into tension. Because she's not afraid of depth, she invites it. There's nothing shy or apologetic about how she explores her pleasure. She's done with the days of feeling guilty for wanting more time, more intensity, more presence, more connection. She's not demanding, she's discerning. And she understands that asking for what she wants, whether emotionally or physically, is not aggressive, it's mature, it's emotionally intelligent, it's powerful. She knows what makes her feel alive, and she doesn't mute that aliveness to appear chill or easygoing. In relationships, her sexual confidence becomes a mirror. It reflects what kind of intimacy she's willing to build. She doesn't settle for connections that are only skin deep. She needs emotional intimacy, mental stimulation, energetic alignment. She wants to be mentally undressed before she's physically touched. She wants to be held emotionally before she's held physically. And she's not afraid to say it, because she doesn't see vulnerability as weakness. She sees it as strength. It's her openness that makes her powerful. She also doesn't fall into the trap of using sex as a way to earn love or connection. Her body is not a bargaining chip. Her intimacy is not a transaction. She gives because she wants to, not because she hopes it will create closeness. She knows the difference between real chemistry and emotional hunger, disguised as passion. She doesn't mistake chaos for connection. She doesn't need drama to feel intensity. Her intimacy is deeply grounded in clarity, in choice, in presence. She creates safe space for her own desire to evolve. She's not rigid. She explores, she's curious. She listens to what her body craves, how her pleasure shifts, how her emotions dance through her skin. She welcomes it all without judgment. And she shares from that place, not because she needs approval, but because she is embodied. She is awake, she is aware. And that awareness is seductive in the deepest, most unforgettable way.
When she communicates her needs in the bedroom, it doesn't sound like criticism. It sounds like confidence.
Slower, she says, not as a command, but as a redirection toward deeper presence. Right there, she whispers. Because she's tuned in, this makes me feel closer, she confides. Because she's brave enough to link emotion and touch. That bravery is a rare kind of eroticism, the kind that doesn't need props or permission. It's human, raw, sensual, and grounded in truth. And even outside of intimacy, her sexual energy doesn't disappear. It simply shifts form. It's in her creative expression, her laughter, her stillness. It's in how she walks into a room without needing to be noticed, but somehow everyone notices anyway. Her energy doesn't scream, it hums, and that hum lingers in the air, like a song no one can quite forget. She doesn't fear her own heat. She doesn't tame her wildness to be more digestible. She doesn't apologize for the way her soul speaks through her skin. She embraces it, owns it, speaks it, because she knows that her pleasure, her sensuality, her erotic voice, they're not extra, they're essential. She doesn't beg for respect in relationships. She doesn't plead to be prioritized. She doesn't twist herself to be seen. A high-value woman knows the weight of her presence, the clarity of her voice, and the strength of her standards. She doesn't need to demand respect. She embodies it. From the way she walks, to the way she speaks, to the way she holds eye contact when others would look away. Her entire being communicates, I know who I am, and I won't shrink for anyone. In intimacy, this energy becomes undeniable. She doesn't chase chemistry by compromising her boundaries. She doesn't confuse silence with approval. She doesn't trade her truth for temporary closeness. Her sense of self is deeply rooted, and it follows her into every moment of vulnerability. When she undresses, she does it without shedding her dignity. When she gives her body, it's never at the cost of her voice. And when she allows someone into her most intimate space, it's because she chooses to, not because she's afraid to lose them. There's a power in how she holds herself, even in the most exposed moments. A kind of quiet authority that doesn't come from ego, it comes from alignment. Her body language says, "You may be close to me, but I am still sovereign." She doesn't beg to be held longer. She doesn't ask for more presence after giving everything. She expects reciprocity, not because she's entitled, but because she's clear on what healthy connection requires. She doesn't perform, she participates, and she makes sure the energy she gives is matched. She carries herself with emotional elegance. When she speaks, her words are not just heard, they land. She doesn't ramble. She doesn't over-explain. She doesn't make herself smaller just to fit someone else's comfort zone. Her tone is calm, yet firm. Her boundaries are expressed without threats or ultimatums. They are simply truths, non-negotiable, self-honoring truths that rise naturally from her values. And because she owns them fully, people feel them long before she has to say them. In relationships, this creates an environment of clarity. She doesn't rely on manipulation or silence to get her needs met. She doesn't weaponize withdrawal or pretend to be fine when she's not. She says what she means, and she means what she says. Her respect for herself sets the tone for how she is treated. And the standard she holds isn't just for others, it's also for herself. She doesn't tolerate behaviors from others that she wouldn't accept from her own reflection. This self-respect is especially potent in intimacy. She doesn't need to be chased to feel worthy. She doesn't use her body as leverage. She doesn't engage in power plays or seductive games. Her power is in her presence. She can sit in stillness and make someone feel more drawn to her than if she had whispered 1,000 seductive words, because her magnetism comes from how she shows up, not how much she gives away. Her calm confidence, her grace under pressure, her quiet refusal to settle, all speak louder than performance ever could. She doesn't need constant reassurance. She provides her own, not from arrogance, but from self-awareness. She knows when she's loving well. She knows when she's giving deeply. And she knows when she's compromising herself. That knowing keeps her steady. It keeps her from falling into relationships that feed on insecurity. It keeps her grounded in her ability to walk away when her values aren't being met, no matter how tempting the connection may seem on the surface. She has the kind of strength that doesn't require loudness. She can walk away in silence and still leave a message that echoes. She can decline with kindness and still hold the boundary. She doesn't mistake softness for weakness. In fact, her softness is strategic. It's chosen, not automatic. It's offered to those who have earned her trust. And even then, it is never detached from her discernment. Her softness is powerful because it comes with conditions. Treat me well or not at all. In romantic dynamics, she sets the emotional temperature. She doesn't allow chaos to dictate her peace. If the conversation turns passive-aggressive or manipulative, she doesn't engage, she observes. If a partner tries to test her boundaries, she doesn't retaliate, she reinforces. And if the energy feels off, she doesn't excuse it, she names it. Her emotional intelligence is sharp, and it informs how she navigates closeness without ever abandoning herself. She knows that respect is not earned in grand gestures. It's proven in consistency, in tone, in follow-through, in how someone shows up when no one's watching. So she watches not with paranoia, but with precision. She pays attention to patterns, to energy shifts, to how aligned someone's actions are with their words. And she listens to her own body and intuition just as much as she listens to what's being said. Because for her, respect is not about titles, it's about alignment.
She honors post-intimacy moments with the same standards.
If there's a shift in tone, an emotional withdrawal, or a sudden disconnect, she doesn't panic. She notices, she inquires, not from desperation, but from maturity. If her needs are being neglected after closeness, she doesn't pretend everything is fine. She checks in with herself. She speaks up. And if the pattern continues, she reclaims her energy. Because nothing, even love, even passion, is worth compromising her self-worth. She understands that true respect is shown in the way someone listens, the way they respond, the way they stay consistent once the novelty wears off. And she mirrors that respect by never overextending herself for people who only meet her halfway. She doesn't need to control anyone's behavior. She simply controls her access. If someone respects her space, her time, her energy, they will feel her warmth, her depth, her fullness, but if not, they will feel her absence, not as punishment, but as a reflection of her values. And the most powerful part, she doesn't speak to convince anyone of her worth. She speaks to reflect it.